On May 12th, 1945, a reverend named Wilbert Vere Audrey, with the encouragement of his wife Margaret, published a book. It was called The Three Railway Engines, and contained 4 short stories about 3 railway engines named Edward, Henry, and Gordon. The publishers were pleased, and audiences were pleased, and wrote to the Reverend many times to ask him for another story. He published another book called Thomas the Tank Engine. Afterwards, these books became more and more popular. In total, Audrey would write 26 books, each containing stories about Thomas and the other engines, and expanding the island. Later on, he would write about its history, people, and railways. And much later down the line, a television show, based off of his books, was aired on 1984. Fast forward 75 years after the publication of the 3 railway engines, and a young boy named Peter Rockley decided to make a wee video based off of the first story. After all, what better time to do it than now, he reasoned. It was the 75th anniversary, and he had ample spare time due to some less than fortunate circumstances. And so, in his spare time, his ample spare time, he began to make a wee video, using his own narration and audio. He didn't do this with the intent to publish it. Didn't do this with the intent to amaze anyone. He just did it for the same reason he did many other things. Because he looked at someone doing the exact same thing and thought, I can do that, just in my own style. 3 years later, we present to you that very same film. And alongside it, we show you his progress now. Roll the tape.
Edward's Day Out. Once upon a time, there was a little engine known as Edward. He lived in a shed with 5 other engines. They were all bigger than Edward and boasted about it. They said, "The driver won't choose you again. He wants big, strong engines like us." Edward hadn't been out for a long time. He began to feel sad. Just then, the driver and fireman walked over to start their work. The driver looked at Edward and asked, "Why are you sad? Would you like to come out today?" "Oh, yes, please," said Edward. So the fireman lit the fire and made a nice lot of steam. Then the driver pulled the lever and Edward puffed away. He whistled, "Look at me now." The other engines were very cross at being left behind. Away went Edward to find some coaches. He found the coaches in a siding. "Oh, do be careful with us, Edward. Don't bump and bang us like the others do," they said to him. So Edward came up to the coaches very gently, and the shunter fastened the coupling. "Thank you, Edward," said the coaches. "That was kind. We are pleased to be having you taking us." And away went Edward to the platform where everyone was waiting. Whistled Edward, "Getting quickly, please." So everyone got in quickly, and Edward waited pleasantly for the guard to blow his whistle and wave his flag. He waited and waited. However, there was no sound of a whistle and no sight of a flag. "Where is that guard?" The driver and fireman walked down the platform. They first asked the station master, "Have you seen the guard?" "Sorry, but I haven't," said the station master. Then they asked the porter, "Have you seen the guard?" "Oh yes, last night," said the porter. Edward was starting to get impatient. "Are we ever going to start?" he said. Just then, a little boy shouted, "Here he comes!" Yes, there was the guard running down the street with his flags in one hand and a sandwich in the other. He ran to the brake coach, blew his whistle, and jumped into his van. And Edward finally set off. Edward had a wonderful time. All the children went away as he went past. And he met many of his friends at all of the stations. The driver was so pleased with his work that day, he promised to take him out again tomorrow. "I'm going out again tomorrow," he told the other engines that night in the shed. What do you say to that? But he didn't care about what they thought, for he was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once.
And that, my friends, was Edward's Day Out. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. It's not one of my best Wii videos, far from it, but I do have a soft spot for it. Now let it be known that this is actually not my first Wii video, period. I made one that predates this by 2 months. However, this is important because it is my first Railway Series Wii video. The first of many. But Peter, I hear you asking, at home, watching this video, is this the best you can do for the anniversary of the Railway Series? No, it isn't. Allow me to present to you what I think is the best of my work for the anniversary of the Railway Series. Now for a scene change. The scene? The fully refined version of Edward's Day Out, complete with new visuals and new audio. Edward's Day Out. Written by the Reverend W. Audrey, narrated by Peter Rockley, and produced and adapted for audio by Rockley and Jonas Productions. Once upon a time, there was a little engine called Edward. He lived in a shed with 5 other engines. They were all bigger than Edward and boasted about it. "The driver won't choose you again," they said. "He wants big, strong engines like us." Edward had not been out for a long time. He began to feel sad. Just then, the driver and fireman came along to start work. The driver looked at Edward. "Why are you sad?" he asked. "Would you like to come out today?" "Yes, please," said Edward. So the fireman lit the fire and made a nice lot of steam. Then the driver pulled the lever and Edward puffed away. He whistled, "Look at me now!" The other engines were very cross at being left behind. Away went Edward to get some coaches. "Oh, do be careful, Edward," said the coaches. "Don't bump and bang us like the other engines do." So Edward came out to the coaches, very, very gently, and the shunter fastened the coupling. "Thank you, Edward," said the coaches. "That was kind. We are glad you're taking us today." Then they went to the station where the people were waiting. Whistled Edward, "Get in quickly, please." So the people got in quickly, and Edward waited happily for the guard to blow his whistle and wave his green flag. He waited and waited, but there was no whistle, no green flag. "Where is that guard?" Edward was getting anxious. The driver and fireman asked the station master, "Have you seen the guard?" "No," he said. They asked the porter, "Have you seen the guard?" Yes, last night," said the porter. Edward began to get cross. "Are we ever going to start?" he said. Just then a little boy shouted, "Here he comes!" And there the guard was, running down the hill with his flags in one hand and a sandwich in the other. He ran onto the platform, blew his whistle, and jumped into his van. Edward puffed off. He did have a happy day. All the children ran to wave as he went past, and he met old friends at all the stations. He worked so hard that the driver promised to take him out again next day. "I'm going out again tomorrow," he told the other engines that night in the shed. "What do you think of that?" But he didn't care what they thought, for he was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once.